be your own cheerleader. It is very easy to be our own critics. We can stand in front of the mirror and pick out a million things we don't like about ourselves. It's much harder to stand there and pick up all the things that we adore. Is so important, but you have to practice it. And what better time to start practicing than during mile 20 of the New York City Marathon?
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Deena Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to this bonus episode, number 153 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I am really excited to bring you this episode and bring it out pretty quickly after it was recorded. This was a live show I did in New York just this weekend. As you can hear from my voice, it is starting to strain a little bit after a lot of talking, a lot of podcast recordings, which you are going to get in the coming weeks, and just kind of possibly overdoing it a little bit, but it's kind of worth it, isn't it? The atmosphere here in New York is just incredible. As I'm recording this, the marathon is the next day, and I'm looking forward to going to watch it. Now, on Friday, we had an episode from Ali Butler-Glenesk, and she was kind of talking about taking on adventures or, these big feats that maybe you think aren't possible. Maybe you think you're never going to be someone who does stuff like that. You're just a middle or back of the packer. Well, hopefully Ali showed you that you too can do something like this. And even if you don't make it to your ultimate goal of this big, long, just destination of whatever it is, it doesn't mean that it's a failure. And actually, one of the podcasts I recorded today, we got into that topic pretty good. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that episode with you from my conversation today. Now, today I am sharing with you this live show I did at the New York Roadrunners Run Center featuring the New Balance Run Hub. It is a wonderful place to be, and I'm just so honored to be able to host a show here. We had a huge turnout. There was tons of people just standing at the back because there weren't enough seats, and it was just a wonderful conversation. Everyone got on really well. We had a special guest who I will tell you about in just a second, because you have had the spoiler alert ruined because you would have seen my photos. But actually, the audience did not know that we had this extra guest coming on. So it was a bit of a surprise in the episode. Now, the main guests for the majority of the episodes were Deena Kastor and Jonathan Fader, both of which I've had on the podcast before. Deena has been on the podcast herself, and Jonathan Fader was on during Mental Training Week. And I wanted to bring them together to give some actionable advice for things to do during the race when you're nervous. And although this is directed at the New York City Marathon, I think you can easily apply it to your race up and coming. So keep this one for a future race if you have one coming up, or maybe even save it for next year, because I think a lot of the things that they talk about apply. And it is wonderful hearing it from Deena, who, has run at the very top level, how she handled those tough moments, but also hearing from Fader why we think these way and why we kind of end up spiraling out of control. It was really interesting. Now, I mentioned a third guest. So the third person to come on the show was Kubra, who had just had her visa granted from Afghanistan just 10 days before the race. And she flew in. I was so excited to bring her onto the show just to talk with us the final 15 minutes to talk about gratitude, mental fortitude. She's obviously been through a lot. She runs through conflict zones, and she is here because of Free to Run, which is a wonderful organization that works particularly with women in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it was really special to be able to bring her on the show. So before we go meet those three wonderful guests, I just want to thank New York Roadrunners for making this possible. And I also want to thank Endeavor Run for sponsoring this episode. So let's hear a little about them and we'll get right to it. Let me just tell you, the people who live in New York have it good. They have this incredible place for runners. If you are lucky enough to live in New York City or near it, I'm really jealous of you because the New York Roadrunners Run Center featuring New Balance Run Hub is by far and away the best place for runners I've ever seen. They have foam rollers, they have mini trash bags if you want to pay it forward and collect trash during your run. They have lockers, they have these big grass steps for stretching on. Or, you could just take a rest on. And best of all, they are constantly hosting these free events to help runners be better, to feel a part of something, to just be a part of this wonderful community. Right there, they have this engaging, supportive environment that's committed to personal growth. And I just love it. It is literally a 2-minute walk from Central Park. So the ideal place it could be. And I wish every city had a place like this to go to. Anyone in St. Louis want to build something like that? I am absolutely honored to be able to host these live events like this one I did with Deena, Fader, and Kubra. It just feels so good to be able to work with people and company who are genuine, who are loving, who are thoughtful. You often see the CEO of the New York Roadrunners, Michael, standing there at the finish line for hours, high-fiving people as they go by. When I ran as a guide for the Achilles Kid race, there he was, high-fiving every child as they crossed the finish line. And speaking of kids, right now, every pair of shoes sold at the New York Roadrunners Run Center, a pair is also donated to a child in a New York Roadrunners youth-supported program. I mean, does it get much better than that, supporting children with every pair of shoes sold? If you have any kind of plans to go to New York City anytime soon, be sure to add the New York Roadrunners Run Center featuring New Balance Run Hub to your list. If you type NYRR in Google, it will come up. And if you live in New York City, well, can I come stay with you every weekend so that I can go to these endless free events that they are offering? Thank you so much to New York Roadrunners for this opportunity. I hope you are enjoying this episode. I have something exciting to share with you. I want to tell you about Endeavor Run. What is Endeavor Run, you ask? Well, it's a start-to-finish program designed by top coaches and runners. So that includes Matt Fitzgerald, Kate Grace, Shannon Robury, Lydia Nada, Jason Fitzgerald, Kyle Merbar, and the one and only Tina Muir, as well as many others. It combines key elements of pro athlete style seasons, such as personalized training from your choice of 5K to marathon, and nutrition plans. There's a team retreat at the University of Oregon, ongoing virtual event and support, VIP race management, and best of all, you do it as a team. You get to know your teammates at the retreat at the University of Oregon, which in itself is a dream, right? And then you go through the phases of training together. Endeavor Run means everything is combined. Every aspect of your training is taken care of, which means it's great value because it's this comprehensive approach. They have everything covered. The goal of Endeavor Run is to emphasize the pillars that distinguish pro athlete training, which is precision, community, and accountability. Now, here is the bit you have to listen to. This is for runners from everywhere and anywhere, and all abilities can join, no matter how fast you are. The only requirement is that you want to take your running season seriously next year. If I'm totally confusing you or you're interested in learning more, there is a useful 2-minute video in the show notes of this episode with a great overview. Now, if you use code Tina Muir when you sign up to Endeavor Run, you can get 10% off and, wait for it, a pair of free shoes of your choice. Yes, that does include those Nike Vaporfly Necks. So there are only 120 spots available for the 2020 program, and the first 50 registrants are guaranteed a single occupancy room at the Oregon retreat. I think this is such an amazing opportunity, which is why I jumped on board to be a part of it. I know you're going to love it, especially if you are someone who needs that accountability and finds training can get lonely. You can find out more in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 156.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Is everybody excited for tomorrow's 2019 TCS New York City Marathon? Yeah. All right. My name is John Phillips. I'm the Director of Runner Programming here at New York Roadrunners. Thank you guys so much for coming to this exciting panel and chat. We're going to go through a lot of race strategies that you guys can actually use for tomorrow that the team up here is going to talk about. You guys aren't here to hear me talk, so I'm going to introduce the lovely Tina Muir. She is my personal and the Run Center's favorite English person. So we are so excited to have her up here. Tina, take it away.
Well, thank you all for coming. I know there's like a million events you could have been at today and every other minute of the day this weekend. So thank you for being here. I am really excited to welcome my guests. I have recently interviewed Dr. Jonathan Fader, who insists, by the way, we have to call him Fader, even though I really struggle with calling people by their last names. Fader is the Director of Mental Conditioning for the New York Giants and the team psychologist for the New York Mets. So I'm excited to bring him on the show for you. And we have someone who I'm sure many of you know very well and love. We have Deena Kastor, who was bronze medalist in the 2004 Olympics. She holds the American record of 2:19 in the marathon and has run 2:27 as a masters runner. Just so impressive. And I'm excited you are here too. So thank you both for being here. All right, Deena, I'm going to start with you. How do you feel being here, even now not running with the pros, not doing it at the same level? Do you still get the nerves and kind of the buzz of everyone else? Because I came in here on Thursday feeling tired. And the second I got to this area, I just felt like I sucked in everyone's energy. So
you get carried away with it. It's lovely, actually. And congratulations to everybody that got this far in their training and ready to toe the line tomorrow. Anybody run the 5K this morning? All right. So you're off your feet, recovering. So it's good that you're sitting down. But it's so fun to be here on Marathon Weekend, whether you're racing or just here to be part of the hype and be a wild fan. It's a total privilege.
Yeah, no, I absolutely feel that as well. And Fader, for you, as a psychologist who works with other athletes, I think there's one question that we as runners, you see us all here looking at you, have. Are runners tougher than everyone else?
I mean, they're definitely tougher on themselves. You guys are super tough on yourselves. And, it's one of those sports, just for clarification, I'm the former psychologist for the Mets and the Giants, so do not blame me for these current seasons if you're... I just want to clarify that. All sports, in my mind, that you are doing on your own, you're naturally going to be tougher on yourself, right? So that's why things like pacing are so effective from a mental perspective. So we're harder on ourselves in sports that are closed like that we're doing on our own, and we're left with our thoughts.
Yeah, and I think most of us can attest to that being hard on ourselves is something we do particularly well. Now, as I said, Fader, with all these people standing here, you coming here today, I don't know if you know, but you signing up for this means that you have to go and stand and watch. How many people are running out there? Every single one of them finish? Is that the deal?
Absolutely. I'm actually thinking about a Baby Bjorn situation where you just put me on your back somehow and you hand off. There's about enough people here. We can do that every half mile. I love, as a spectator, having people that I've trained and coached in the marathon, I love watching this. And just to your point, Deena, it doesn't matter if you're running or not. Of course, if you're running and if you're running at your level, you're getting amped. But even just watching this, you really feel that energy and feel that what we call physiological arousal. That's something that we're trying to regulate as athletes. We feel that just as spectators, same way we would if we're watching the Super Bowl. It's just we're human, and when we see that energy, we feel it.
So when people talk about how they watch a marathon and they decide, I suddenly want to watch it because even though you're watching people in pain, you're watching people literally, almost falling over because they're struggling so much. But then that person watching says, actually, I think I want to do that. Is there something behind that?
Yeah, so basically we're painting runners as the people who beat themselves up and masochists. But I feel that, look, for personal reasons in terms of injury, I'm not running and haven't run. But we did a panel at another running event, and I started to think, oh my God, I want to do this, right? And everybody in my life was like, you're not doing it, and they're right for my personal reason. But what I'll say about this is, I think as humans, it's so natural to just want to best ourselves, and a marathon is such an incredible way to really find our best self. It's a way to do it in this community and get support. So I think it's just natural to want to, as a human being, find your best self.
I love that. All right. So, Fader, when I had you on the show previously, we broke down the race into 3 months, kind of giving people advice as to how to mentally prepare for the race. But today, we're right here, right now. So we're going to start by talking about this moment right now. So, Deena, I want to start with you. For those people who put their hands up saying that they are racing right now, if you were racing tomorrow, how would you be feeling at this point?
Yeah, well, someone came up to me and said that they were nervous here. And I said, it's excitement in disguise. Like, it is the same feeling, kind of the butterflies floating in your stomach, but you have the power to define it in your own way, what that feeling is. And if And sometimes we associate nervousness with powerlessness, like this is hijacking me. And instead, it's that feeling of investment. You put a lot of time into this, and you should feel invested. I think disappointment resonates the same way with me. I used to think it meant that I was a failure, and now I realize it's the feeling of feeling invested and feeling like you want more out of yourself. So get back to work. And so we have the power within us to define our emotions in the way that's gonna serve us best. And this is your time to do that. That queasiness in your stomach is excitement to get on the line and show how hard you've been working over the last months, the long runs you've put in. Can you believe that you put in a 20-mile run or an 18-mile run? Like 5 months ago, that 5 miles probably seemed unbearable. So it's a super exciting time, but it's also a time where you're like, gosh, my calf is really tight. And why am I so tired? And, tapering, you think you're going to be bounding with energy, and you may or probably not bounding with energy because you just put in a boatload of work. So realizing that sometimes at this moment, you start to have second guesses like, oh, I wish I had one more week of training or one more month of training, or maybe I should train for a spring marathon instead. Maybe I should just watch because the people on the sidelines make it look so much fun. And we are all invested, the spectators too, feeling that sense of community and being a part of it. But I think the job for you right now is to not create that list of disbelief, but create that belief list in yourself. So the night before a major marathon, I always sit in my hotel room and I go through my training log, or maybe if it's in your head, you can just do it that way. But just think of 3 reasons why you should succeed in reaching your goal tomorrow and commit that to memory, because at mile 20, you might want to pull that out of your pocket and be like, bam, I did this. I can get through this. And so committing to memory 3 reasons why you should succeed tomorrow, and start building that belief instead of psyching yourself out at the last minute.
Such good advice there. Thank you. Yeah. So you mentioned about a pain. That is such a common thing for people to experience, or, that fatigue. If they are kind of spiraling negative thoughts out of control, saying, I can't do this, I'm not ready for this. And they're trying to look at their training, but they're saying, it doesn't matter what I've done in my training. It hurts. I feel bad. I'm not going to be able to run well. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think when we're out there, we have about 70,000, I think 55 to 75,000 thoughts that go through our head every day. And in the marathon, we have probably a little more on a marathon day. You have control of your thoughts. If something comes in and tries to drag you down and make you throw in that towel and give up, dig down. And I feel that way so many times when the going gets tough in a marathon. Wow, this is the time. This is the moment that I get to grow as an athlete and as an individual. Because sometimes I could say, oh, it's just a race, or I'll just finish. Or maybe if I sit here for a while and eat this banana, I'll feel better. But then I think, you know what, this is defining my character. These are creating the habits of thought. This choice right now is reinforcing a habit of thought. So if I give up in this moment, I'm creating a habit of giving up, or starting the habit of giving up. So I make it a pretty serious moment. Like this is about defining who you are. And so instead of giving up, I dig down and keep going. Then you have the opportunity to make that choice time and time again, but you have to create that habit.
Love that. And Fader, but first let's talk about Deena's response there. Is that kind of textbook what someone should be saying?
I'm in love with Deena's response. I'm married, but if I wasn't married, I would marry Deena's response. I mean, the idea of nervousness being excitement. Sorry to make you blush here. I know we're both fair skinned, so we blush very easily. Basically, the idea of excitement, nervousness being excitement in disguise, is a beautiful way to describe, I would say, 25% of what we mean when we say mental conditioning. A lot of people get confused about sports psychology and think, oh, I see a sports psychologist because I'm struggling. No. 90% of the people that see me, whether they're runners, triathletes, baseball players, football players, or people in the corporate space, see me because they want to have that extra 1%. And when you think about that extra 1%, it's what Deena's talking about. Now, look, everybody gets nervous, right? I mean, if you put like a heart rate monitor through on me here, or any of us, our heart rates up here are going to be higher than they are for you sitting there watching. This is all mental state. And so, to add to what Deena's saying, Steph Curry has a quote, says, I don't get bothered by butterflies anymore. They just tell me I'm getting ready to perform. And so, I think building on what Deena's saying, your thoughts are going to come into your head, and you have a choice. How am I going to respond to that thought? And just like you would think, well, if my legs chafe or if my nipples chafe, I'm going to do X. If my thoughts do this, I'm going to respond in this fashion, right? Not react to my thoughts, but respond to my thoughts. If I have this thought, well, I'll respond with this thought, right? If I think, oh my God, I'm feeling nervous, I'm like, oh no, that's excitement. That's a great way. And I know I'm going to do that. If I'm sitting there in Staten Island, all of a sudden I feel my heart rate running, to say, oh, no. Actually, what I say is, hello, old friend. And the reason I say that to me is because actually who's responding, the person who's doing that is my ancestor, right? The person that's doing that is 600,000 years of evolution. And when I get nervous, fight or flight, when I get nervous when I'm in Staten Island, it's that I actually think that there's like a tiger out there. That's what my brain thinks. And I'm like, hello, old friend. And I actually laugh. So my heart might be racing, or I might be worried about my timing or my pacing, but really I can put it into perspective. So I think really Deena's right, but having a method that you're going to do it and knowing ahead of time, here's how I'll struggle. I know myself. Here's what I will say to myself. Here's how I'll coach myself in those moments.
So good. Thank you both so much for that advice. All right, let's move to bedtime. You know, as much as we all envision in our mind going to bed, getting a nice peaceful night's sleep and just relaxing, feeling good in the morning, that very rarely happens the night before or the night after. So Deena, what would you do if your mind was racing, if you started, just thinking about what you were going to do the next day, particularly if it was maybe coming from a sense of fear or the unknown? What was your kind of tactic if your mind started to race the night before as you were in bed?
Yeah, or the jackhammer that is happening right outside your bedroom window at 2 or 3 in the morning. To me, it's about your entire lifestyle. If you eat well most of the time, if you sleep well most of the time, getting a poor night's sleep or having a bad meal every once in a while isn't going to be dire on the consequences. I remember running my fastest half marathon, being so jet lagged, I don't even remember the first half of the race. So I think sleep is important, but it's important all the time. And if you don't get a good night's sleep sometime, it's fine. And I think sometimes when we're not falling asleep right away, we tend to get anxious and just create that bigger cycle of not falling asleep. So a tactic of counting or relaxing from the tip of your toes, all your body parts, all the way up to your head. Maybe you can fall asleep, but maybe you're just in a deep state of relaxation, and that in itself is fine. Your body will still know how to put one foot in front of the other the next morning.
Yeah, thank you. And Fader, anything you would add? As I'm sure all athletes get the same way.
I mean, this we could talk about for a really long time. For me, sleep is the number one performance enhancer, like better than sports psychologists all day long. Sleep is really where it's at and actually there's so much evidence that says sleep protects you from injury. I mean, there's so much sleep research that is clear. I think, the two things I would say for just 2 tips, because like we're right here at the race, but the 2 tips I think about are, one, counting in a specific way. Actually, what I found to be most effective for most athletes is counting down from 1,000.
In Spanish would really do well too.
998, right? So like you are going down in Spanish, in whatever foreign language, sign language, but that would be more distracting. But basically, if you can go down there, and then if you notice that your mind is going off, you just come back to 1,000 and start again. It's so monotonous that you actually for most people that works. And the other thing is, get out of bed. I know it sounds weird, but if you find yourself in bed for longer than like 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, get out, reset, come back to bed. Sit in low light, come back to bed. Because what happens is you can kind of get into a pattern where you start to associate the bed with thinking. So just get out, come back to bed. Don't go watch like, Succession or something like that. Don't watch Netflix. Go out, sit in low light, and come back to bed, because you can kind of reset and get back into there. I think long-term in terms of sleep, there are a million things you could do. And the best thing to do is think about building some really excellent sleep hygiene, which is to condition your nighttime routine with sleep. Most people do not. Most people are like looking at their phone in bed, then they use their alarm, which is next to their, raise your hand if your phone is your alarm, right? So which means that it's next to you, right? And so these are the things that people do, and it's really hard to get away from those things. But you can actually improve your sleep dramatically long-term as an athlete by just making your phone not your friend an hour, 90 minutes before bedtime. That's like a huge thing that I know it's really easier said than done, but that's an enormous thing. And when I've worked with athletic teams and we've hired sleep consultants to come in, that's the kind of thing that they're doing all the time, is trying to free people from the connection to the things that activate them before they go to sleep.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just
Really
going to
helpful.
expand on the sleep part, if I may, because we're talking about the 1% performance edge by controlling your mind, the 1% performance edge by getting enough sleep, the 1% that comes from eating better, hydrating better, and you add up those percentages, and you're getting pretty fast when you're paying attention to that. And so, just for your future training, I would recommend trying to get into bed a half hour earlier just to get an extra half hour. And then from there, an extra half hour, and just see how much sleep you can actually give yourself. Because when you're sleeping, your body produces cortisol, a stress hormone. And when you're sleeping, it stops producing that stress hormone and begins producing human growth hormone. So you get so much repair and replenishment that happens during that sleep cycle that if you can get more of it, you're not just going to be a better runner. You're going to be a better mom, a better dad, a better in the workplace. It's going to make you better at anything that you try to do. So sleep is really, really important for our entire lifestyle, our longevity, as well as hitting a marathon PR or Boston qualifier.
So true. And I just want to say to anyone who is listening who does struggle with insomnia or just falling asleep, like I remember in the past when I struggled with that, when people like Deena would say that, I'd be like, well, that's great, but I'm just going to lie there for half an hour. So if you have that, I do actually have a previous podcast episode on sleep, and she gives really helpful advice for that. So, all right, so let's skip to the race tomorrow. Deena, from what I have heard, I've actually never been here marathon weekend, so I don't even know what the marathon's like at all. But from what I've heard, miles 18 and mile 23 around the hill are some tough parts. Mile 18 because the crowd's kind of thin and you may have gone a bit fast because of the crowds. And mile 23, there's a hill. What would you say are the tough parts, and how did you get through it when you were running New York?
Yeah, I think it gets tough right after First Avenue because you have that rush of excitement, having 5 people deep of screaming fans on both sides of the road. And I can't believe they have the endurance to do that for 5 hours. So you have that big rush. And even if I would tell you to focus on staying on your pace at that point, because it's very easy to get carried away with all the energy that the crowd is feeding you at that moment. But it goes away and it gets quiet at I think it's mile 20 that it gets really quiet. And so I would say to just pace yourself in that off of First Avenue, because you're going to need to sustain that energy. And when it starts to get quiet, you be your own cheerleader. It is very easy to be our own critics. We can stand in front of the mirror and pick out a million things we don't like about ourselves. It's much harder to stand there and pick up all the things that we adore. And I feel like we could do that in any capacity in our lives. But to be that cheerleader, to be that advocate is so important, but you have to practice it. And what better time to start practicing than during mile 20 of the New York City Marathon?
Well, I challenge everyone to try that tomorrow. And Fader, what would you add for, quiet moments where maybe everyone's had all these crowds and then suddenly they're left with their own thoughts? As you can imagine, a tough time around mile 20.
Well, first of all, I mean, as Deena was alluding to, we all tell ourselves stories, and that's how we learn as humans. That's how we communicate as group. We're always telling ourselves stories about ourselves. And if you create a story in your mind about the wall or this mile 18 or mile 20, you're going to believe it. And so it's what you write to yourself in your mind about it. So, for example, if you start saying to yourself, wow, I'm so lucky I get to challenge myself like that. There's not that many people that get to challenge themselves like that. I'm lucky that I get to do that, right? Then you start to think about it a little differently. I've had a lot of athletes actually say things to themselves like "love the wall" up to the race, right? You're changing your perception of what that experience is going to be like. So you have a choice: are you going to see it as a threat or are you going to see it as a challenge? And if you begin to train your mind, just even talking to yourself. Another thing, just as a quick strategy that deserves much more time, is imagery. So taking some time, closing your eyes, even tonight, right, and saying, I'm going to imagine that space, and I'm going to imagine the challenge. I'm not going to imagine myself, PRing it even. I'm just going to imagine the challenge of it and how my body's going to feel and myself successfully dealing with my body and using the same language that I'm using pre-race. So if I'm using the term "love the wall," in my mind, I'm practicing that. So when I get out there, my mind knows what to do. It knows it's going to be a challenge. And this is the same technique that not only we use in football, but it's used in the military, it's used in other settings as well. If your mind is habituated, meaning it gets used to the challenge, then when you get out there in physical time, it's going to be like you've done this before. It's functional equivalence, which means if you do it in your mind, your body's going to be ready when you actually get there in the way that Deena's talking about.
you're conditioning yourselves to be your own Navy SEAL.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, and by the way, it's that point it's what the Navy SEALs do with that kind of challenging situation. So I think, that's a huge way. Who here is running, for the first, second, or third time? Right. So there's a few people here, and just thinking about it is, if you've done it more than once, you can use imagery that you can snap back to things that felt good before and bring that into the imagery you're using for this race.
Thank you for that. And you also mentioned in there a kind of appreciation that you're here, that you get to, do this challenge. And Deena, you have made it very clear you are a huge fan of gratitude. Why do you believe that's so important?
Yeah, I think I stumbled on gratitude at the beginning of my professional career, just as a little exercise with my coach's wife. We had a little book club together, and I wrote down in my journal, my gratitude journal, 10 things that I was grateful for. And it was an extra hot cappuccino, sitting in the rocking chair on the front porch while my dog was peeing in the yard, putting lavender inside my running shoes to freshen them up. And so I was grateful for all these things. But then the next day I'm like, okay, I can't put a cappuccino down. I can't put lavender down. And so I started searching for unique items to put on my gratitude list. And what happened is throughout the day, I was looking for gratitude and things that I appreciated, as opposed to being frustrated with finding a parking spot at the grocery store, or frustrated that there was ruts on the trail, or angry that my food wasn't coming out fast enough for my appetite. And so it really built into seeing so many things that I appreciated in my life, as opposed to seeing the other half that was out there. And really, it's all happening around us. And what we choose to focus on is our story. So gratitude was such an easy but really deep way to flood my body with endorphins and get a performance edge and an edge on my life by practicing it.
Just to say something, it's so powerful what you're saying, because I think what it shows is Deena's talking about, here's someone who's at the top of their game, but more than top, like you don't even see them on the chart. And she's still looking for ways to get even deeper. So it's just so motivating, I think, for all of us, right? That even if you have like 100%, there's still that little thing that you can do. In my life, gratitude, there's so much data, research on the effects of gratitude. And just like Deena's pointing out, not even about this race, just your overall health. There's research that shows that gratitude has implications for cardiac health. Like it changes the way that our cardiovascular system works. So if you think about what it might do there, I'm sure it's going to help all of us with things like mile 18 or any aspect of the race.
Well, thank you for that. And on that topic, I have a surprise for you guys. I'm just going to ask these two, we're going to have a chair brought out. We do have someone who has come here. Her visa was only granted a few days ago. She has come all the way here from Afghanistan. So I want to bring Kubra out to come talk to us. So Kubra is here because of Free to Run, which is an organization which works primarily with women in Afghanistan and Iraq, empowering them to be leaders. We're really lucky to have her here. And, we've just been talking about gratitude. How are you feeling being here right now, knowing that it came that close to the edge that you nearly weren't here?
Thank you for having me here. I am extremely happy to be here and be able to run New York City Marathon and represent my country. It's a privilege that has been given to me, and I really appreciate it.
And so, Fader, thinking about what Kubra has done coming here, and just, in general, all of us, we overcome difficult things. Kubra's probably have been a lot tougher than many of us would have experienced. But how does toughness, or things that we go through in our lives that are difficult and struggles that we have, how does that help us? Because it does often help us with motivation, maybe for Kubra on Sunday, or maybe for other people out here who have struggled with things of their own.
Well, thank you so much, Kubra, for coming and for being brave enough to be on this panel with us as well. We so appreciate it. And I think, I don't know about your experience in detail, but I know that for people who've been through what you've been through, and for all of us, that if you've been through something that's difficult and you overcome it, it just builds what we call self-efficacy, or basically confidence. And the ability to recognize that in our lives and appreciate that, the things that we've been challenged by, builds what we call as grit, the ability to handle future stresses. And I think that as a whole, what we don't do enough is to really think deeply about what motivates us to race. A lot of times we're thinking about outcomes like PRs and things like that, but to really think about why we're running and to make that prominent. I mean, I remember when I was working with the Giants, one of the players had in his locker room just a sign that said, "Don't ever forget how badly what you have now, what you once wanted." So the idea that, I'm going to remind myself in some way of that. And I think we get really focused on the outcome rather than thinking about, why am I doing this? Now, you have a tremendously powerful why. I hope we get to hear a little bit about that, but a tremendously powerful motivation. But for all of us to think about here, what's the result of this? Like, what does it mean to finish? What does it mean to finish the third time? What does it mean to have a better record? How is that going to affect my family? How is that going to affect my own mindset? And to be able to even write that down and have that as something that is a fire that motivates you.
So Kubra, on that note, we would love to hear what is your why, what made you start running, and how has it helped you since?
First, I want to talk about why I am doing this, why I'm running this New York City Marathon. First, I am running this New York City Marathon for all Afghan runners back in my country. And the second one, thank you. And the second one is that I am doing this for all runners all over the world. We all are runners, and we are going to go through race tomorrow together, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I thank you for saying that. I mean, I think everyone out here who is racing, I hope you will be thinking about Kubra out there and what she's representing by doing this. And how did your running journey begin for you? What was it that initially got you going?
Back in May 2015, I met our founder, Stephanie Case. She hired me as a videographer to film two first Afghan girls who were going for a Gobi March in China, 250 kilometers. I was really inspired by the things they were doing, running, hiking, going outside. And I remember they were running on hills, and I had the camera back and running with them, and I shouting, "The next team that goes for the ultra is me, Stephanie." And she was so happy about when she heard about this. And then the next team comes application, I applied for it, and then I had my training, and I went for my first ever race, which was 250 kilometers in Sri Lanka, February 2016. But I was dropped out at the first day after 30 kilometers because I got sick. And that was a very disappointing experience I had, and I thought I am not going to finish or cross any finish line. But 9 months later, without any training, I crossed my first marathon 6 minutes before cutoff. And that made me to think whatever comes on my way or whatever race is going to be, I'm going to finish it and cross the finish line.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Deena, for you, how does why come into your kind of experience? How did you manage to use that in moments of struggle?
Yeah, I think having a purpose is really, really important. And because you could give up on your goals pretty easily, because what does a podium matter? What does the finish line matter? I can get in a taxi and get there a little faster. So for me, having that purpose is really important, and it's changed over time. I think now, in being at the kind of the back end of my professional career, certainly the peak of my career being in the past, and I hear my husband saying, "Well, that attitude it is," but I realistically won't run 2:19 again, and I know with that attitude. So I think the purpose now, before it was to find out every way I can get my body to perform at its best, and that was really important, to get that blueprint out there, and for a personal blueprint, and then to always try to. I had to come to terms with, once I realized my competitive days were winding down, that I could still get the best out of myself on a daily basis, and that became very important. That this may not be a 2:19, it might be a 2:35, but I did it with a lot more grace and a lot more knowledge, and that was important. So I feel like every year I get better and better, even though my times don't show that. And now I think my purpose, I wrote a book last year, and my purpose in writing that was inspired by my first professional coach, who led by example, and he shared everything and showed me that the value of everything that we have, whether it's time or money or knowledge, that it increases in value the moment we share it with others. And so my purpose in writing that book and continuing to sit here with everybody today and to continue in this sport that I love, in the community that I love, is to share what I know.
Thank you. That's great. And you know, you would have built a lot of like mental toughness being just out there all those years and kind of even towards these years dealing with the fact that you were getting slower and losing that top end speed. Kubra, for you, you've obviously been through a lot to be here, you know, getting a visa granted a few days ago. I can imagine that was very stressful. How are you going to be using that and thinking about that on Sunday?
Running New York City Marathon was one of my wishes for 3 years. I remember when I started running, I saw a picture of the Brooklyn Bridge with all those runners, like so many runners, and I always wanted to be on that bridge. And it's coming. Like tomorrow, I'm gonna run New York City Marathon, and all these trainings, all these dreams, going through. Applying for the visa, I received it just 10 days ago, and coming here, all this stress will make me feel and be stronger for tomorrow in order to finish the race.
Love that. Thank you. All right, just to wrap up here, I just want to see if each of you could give one piece of advice for maybe we had quite a few people who were on their first, second, third marathons, or anyone who just is running their first New York City. Fader, anything you would like to say to people to remind them just as a wrap up here of what they should keep in mind as they go to this race tomorrow?
I don't know if I can, sorry, can I get two? I don't know if I can wrap it up in just one. I would say the two things I think about are, number one, practice enjoyment. Don't just say like, enjoy it, I'm going to enjoy it, but like practice enjoyment. So I would say, you know, see if you can take certain cues at certain parts of the race. I would say, you know, when your start, maybe the wall, maybe the end, and say at those parts, I'm going to remember to say to myself something I feel grateful or lucky about being here. I think number one, that can improve your performance. And number two, like, why are we doing this? Right. And so to be able to get back into the moment by having that kind of routine, something you're planning on doing, not that it'll occur to you, but I'm going to do that. And you could even do it at every mile marker if you wanted to. Right. But just having that. And the second thing is, remember, you can't actually control your thoughts. You can control the thought you have about your thoughts. You can't actually control your thought. You can control the thought you have about your thought. Like you know, Deena was saying, you're going to have 60,000 thoughts, maybe 100,000 tomorrow. You can respond to your brain however you like. A million thoughts are going to come into your mind, but how you respond is what dictates your actual performance.
I'm going to steal that sometime. I love that.
Steal it. It's yours.
Control the thought about your thoughts.
A wise person just told me if you share your ideas, it's more wealth. So steal it.
Oh my gosh. So I'm big on quotes. We have a big chalkboard in our great room. And
what did you just say?
I'm big on quotes.
The grape room.
Great room.
Grape.
Not a well, we have a grape room. That's a wine closet. But I'm talking about like the big room where we entertain. And
I thought you said grape room.
There's usually grapes in the great room, in liquid form. But no, we have this big chalkboard. I love quotes. And the longest standing quote, and don't worry, I'm not going to get political, was a Barack Obama quote that in his inauguration said, and I'm paraphrasing, "There is nothing more satisfying to the spirit or defining of your character than giving your all to a great task." And I think it's very appropriate on marathon week to kind of get that going through your brain. Maybe Google it so that you get it accurately. But I think tomorrow you're going to undertake a great task. And I think it's why the finish line feels so darn good. So think of that when the going gets tough out there, that you're going to put a lot into it, and it should challenge you by the end. And if you're running it right, it should challenge you at the end, but know how great and defining of your character it's going to be once you get to that finish line and celebrate it in a big way.
Thank you, Deena. All right, Kubra, what would you say?
I am a newly runner. It has been 3 years that I'm running. But what I want to say is that we are stronger than what we think. I had just removed my appendix 2 months ago. And I did a marathon 3 weeks ago, and I'm going to do this marathon again. And we are beyond our thoughts. We are so strong. Like tomorrow, every one of us is going to shine, and I'm lucky to be here. Thank you, guys.
So I wanted today to be something that you could take, that was actionable, that you could use in your race tomorrow. You know, there's a lot of the talks are motivational, and you can think about those moments, but hopefully the things that we have talked about today, you can physically, well, maybe not physically, but you can mentally use them and think about the concepts that we've talked about today. So I just want to take a moment, firstly, to thank New York Road Runners for this opportunity. And then to thank Fader, Deena, and Kubra for being here, and you know, Kubra especially coming all this way and coming out here in front of us. It's a very brave thing to do. These two are used to being out in front of a crowd, but this is a big thing for Kubra. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to them. Hi friends, by now I've made it pretty clear that the mental side of training is really important to me. Well, it's actually important to everyone, but it's important to me to show you just how much it can help you run those big goals you really, really want. Because it does. And that is why this episode came about today. I wanted to give specific advice runners could use during the race, the New York City Marathon race, and allow you to see that even people like Deena Kastor can struggle at times. But you know what got her through when those negative voices were screaming? Her mind, reframing and using some of those mental tactics we're talking about today. Now, I hear you time and time again say that you want to work on your mental toughness. That's the thing that let you down. And maybe you read an article or even a book, but do you actually see any changes or take action on it? If you're honest with yourself, probably not. And no, don't worry, you're not alone. I always promise I'm going to start stretching and rolling tomorrow, but I just don't. So I hear you. But the thing is, if you have a big goal, something you really, really want, like that BQ, sub 4, or your first half marathon, you are unlikely to get there if you haven't already trained your mind into the right place. And that's why I created this 12-week mental training course to take you step by step through the tactics that you can work on in your mind to show you that you can do this. It's going to help you figure out what to say back when those negative voices are spiraling out of control. I have action sheets to help you stay accountable. I'll be checking in with you weekly to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. The course goes on sale November 15th, and for opening weekend, so the 15th through the 18th of November, there'll be a $100 sale on it, making it $197. This is for lifetime access. After Monday the 18th, it will go up to $297, and then I will close the doors till May 2020, just a few weeks later. If you feel like giving up mentally has been your weakness, this is the time to go through with a class of other runners who are also training the same hard times and doubts. And I've seen it already, how it changed the lives with the beta group who took it early. Don't miss out. Don't regret it. Sign up for the waitlist at tinamuir.com/mental training. That's TINAMUIR.com/mental training. That's one word. I will guarantee you a spot in the first class. My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast. Or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Such a good conversation. And can I just tell you a little bit of inside information? So after the episode, we always get taken around the corner for people to have photos taken with the podcast host and the podcast guests. And as you can imagine, with Deena being there was a huge line. And a few people were excited to see me, which was nice. So thank you for those of you who are listening. But after we had done all that, after we had taken, I don't know, I'd say close to 100 photos, Deena, Fader, his assistant Olivia, and Piper, Deena's daughter, and I were all stood around. and Fader started doing magic tricks to impress Piper. And she just was so in awe. It was so cool for me to see a child, you always see children amazed by magic, but just watching, it was impressive what he was doing. We couldn't figure out what he was doing, but just to watch Piper look in amazement at what he was doing. He was putting his ring through her ear. He was, doing card tricks for her. It was just really cool to see. And Deena was so relaxed. And we just all had such a wonderful conversation. Those two ended up becoming friends, and they are going to stay in touch. And Deena says she wants to go see him talk the next time he's going to talk. So really cool for me knowing that I kind of put that together as well. So that was such a wonderful conversation. And especially, as I said, bringing Kubra in at the end there with her story, just so powerful. As you heard, there was lots of applause in that episode. And I really think it was worth it. Like, a lot of the things they were saying were really powerful, but also just the story of Kubra and how far she's come. It was just really, really cool for me to be a part of. And it was such an honor to be able to do that. So thank you again, New York Road Runners, for allowing me this opportunity. And thank you to my guests, Deena and Fader and Kubra, for coming on the show. So you have another bonus episode coming on Wednesday, which is my episode with Generation UCAN. It was a podcast panel with myself, Carrie Tollefson, Angie Spencer, and Emily Abati. Wonderful conversation. I really hope you are going to subscribe if you're not already, so you can go get that one. And then I have my regular episode coming to you on Friday, which is an extra special one. It's all about meditation. And there's even a meditation practice at the end. So we actually know how to do meditation rather than just hearing people talk about it and then not knowing how to actually implement it. So thank you so much for listening to this bonus episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are planning on doing a race sometime soon, you can take this with you. And I really think it's going to help you to listen to it the day before. Maybe you can listen to it the afternoon before, and you can just follow through as if you were there and apply it to your race. So thank you for listening. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out teenamure.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.